Good morning, everyone. You're listening to Trace Elements Radio, live, of course, with Tracey Kennedy. We need to look very seriously at our planet right now because there are disasters going on. Chile, for one. 80% of all pools in the United States and Canada are actually unfit for children to be in. The violence, like sick, twisted violence, young people hurting animals, caregivers hurting children and our elders. Let me take one disaster and know that there are so many right now. I would need a 10-hour show to tell you how badly we're in trouble. Let's look at Canada. Now, our oil and gas sector, 192 million tons CO2 emissions in 2014 alone. This is not decreasing, it is increasing. Bitumen sands are the largest single contributor to the climate disaster ongoing on this planet. The physical part of it. Climate scientist James Henson tells us expanding tar sands development means game over for our climate. We don't need more pipelines. We need the carbon in all its forms and the minerals in all its form to stay in the ground. The beast, the forest fire, 85 million tons of CO2 emissions so far. Most expensive, perhaps, natural disaster in Canadian history thus far. Residents are innocent victims of this horrific climate disaster. And I realize people still want to argue on whether or not there is any climate change going on. I would like to call those people idiots, officially, because obviously they haven't been outside. And you don't get red plumes. You don't get new species actually starting to take over now without a devastation. And there is one. There's this huge cone of silence going on this planet right now. Because this fire isn't just burning bitumen. This is burning of the nuclear waste, which is badly stored in Alberta. So the beast stands over, 500,000 hectares. If you don't know what that is, please look it up. We have seen bigger fires, of course, but nothing like this has ever happened in a populated area. Not since the Great Fire in Chile, 2014, has such a large city taken a direct hit from a wildfire. But almost a month before anyone's allowed back in, it doesn't look like it's going to be stopped. So June 1st, if people get back, by the sounds of things, they may not be able to return to their homes. Now I realize the coolest May temperatures since 1882 are recorded in Washington, D.C. But look what's happening all over the planet. We have iridescent clouds suddenly forming, shaking and rattling, rolling. Earthquakes worldwide, 40 volcanoes right now as I speak. So oddly, this cone was imposed on the city shortly after the wildfire started and forced its entire population to flee. Selectively applied. Of course, non-disclosure agreements is what it's looking like, and carefully vetted media reports as well. Never since the city went up in flames, the media has repeatedly said that Canadian authorities claim 2,400 structures were destroyed. 90% of the city was saved, though. But if the city was spared, why is it that Fort McMurray is not already resuming its role as home to anyone? Because it's not. Now, on May 19th, access to the city remained very tightly controlled, with police at exits, the main highway throughout town, preventing vehicles from turning onto any street. No one is allowed in or out. No one is allowed to report without pre-approval, I presume. What they see there, it's very strange. What is the real picture here? Was it something like 90% of Fort McMurray destroyed? We are having dozens of rare tornadoes, hailstorms, and the animals are attacking. Because animals have even had enough of our shit right now. Camel bit this guy's face off because he left him tied in the heat. Animals are striking back. If you go and get a chance, you can look at my Facebook pages and, of course, Trace Elements Radio, where you will see there's a rise in animals turning around and attacking because they've had enough of our brutality. And that's what it is. It's brutality. So, we could go on and on about the disasters. 3 nuclear incidents in the United States right now. One looks worse than Fukushima. But mostly what I see is people putting their thumbs in their mouth and rocking back and forth. So something major is going on here. Something major that goes beyond the physical. I say this because anyone who has respect for their mother, this planet that we call home, and unless you know some super secret place that you're going to be taken to, this is the only one. To make us so unaware of what's around us is a huge step. They have had to make us blind and dumb. And we have gone through history of the earth, the old stories, the oldest ones, the oldest images, the oldest pictures that say at one time, this earth was more divine feminine orientated. So there was a lot of curves and spirals and dancing and voluptuousness and abundance. There's times of lots of fruits and vegetables and the earth in her full magnificence. And then the male aspect came in. Not officially a takeover at first, but the longer it went, the worse the takeover became. You know, if you read the ancient texts, especially the stuff that didn't make it into the Bible, that didn't make it into any of the books, like the book of Thomas, the book of James, all of the Apocrypha. It paints a story of what happened here when the undivine masculine, if you will, took over. And if you read those books, you will see that circumcision was not what you were told it is. It was to make men eunuchs. Some men, of course. Eunuchs. Yeah, Enoch, too, because we're going to be re-looking at that as we go on. Now we see, played out in front of us with the twerking and things like, I don't know, Beyonce's Lemonade. Lemonade. Who does a perfect example of what the negative feminine is. The undivine feminine. Who is usually abused by the undivine masculine, of course. And when this happens, you get her, the Red Queen, the abused woman, who actually ends up kind of gravitating towards abusive males. Now, I'm not saying there was not a time when there was male and female working together, because there must be male and female working together. When we don't have that, look around, where people are more concerned of what they're going to have than what they're going to do. Let's face it, I'm sitting here, 12 in the afternoon, in my house, talking to you. Why am I doing that? And let's be really brutally honest. You know, I look at Facebook and there's all these people talking about, people are complaining and they're not doing this. If we were healthy, we would be outside right now. We would be working, maybe. Working in the fields, playing with our kids. No, we are sitting on our asses here. You're listening to me. I'm obviously glad that you're sitting and taking time to listen to me. I'm doing this because I'm not well. If I was well, I wouldn't be doing this. And that's honest. And I don't want to, I'm not saying it because I don't appreciate you. I do. It's important. We're here, and that's important. It's important that we should be working together. But no, that's not what's happening. I listen to most alternative radio, and especially the ones who think they're awake and aware, who scare the crap out of me for the most part, because it kind of still sounds like the preschool arguments of my daddy's stronger than your daddy. My power is stronger than your power. But we're not doing anything. We're sitting in the house. We're sitting in the house. To prepare for this world, we should be outside. We should be working out. We should be finding a way to get our souls back. But we lost our love of the mother. Because when you're in love, do you remember what that feels like? To be deeply head over heels in love. You wouldn't be able to hurt your brother, or your sister, or your child, or your elder. Because at the beginning, there were no chiefs. There were no kings. Probably wasn't even a leader. There were elders. That is an entirely different thing. And everything we've been taught is about defilement. Do you know where we get the name shaman? It's a Dutch word. this, I think he was 18 years old. This guy went into the woods, it was in Russia, saw these women practicing an art, perhaps casting a spell, probably naked. And he called them the shadows. It scared the crap out of them. Shaman comes from shadow, the Shah. This word spread around. But know that this has nothing to do with love. This has to do with fear. A fear of a man for a woman. How did that happen? How do we grow one plant and pull out all of the important plants all around it? How do we have no elders? How do we have no women who are taking care of those things? Knowing and teaching the children what to eat, how to go outside and respect this land. We need each other. It's funny, I haven't been feeling well. You guys get that. And so, without fail, every day someone says, Tracy, have you tried marijuana? Yeah, because I don't do any research. But let's look at that. Even the male and female plants have a different role. And people who grow this plant knows that you cannot put a male plant with a female plant. Although she wants him. She will get you high. He will build you anything. You separate them and you get a longing. She is creative, of course. But she wants to create with male. When we go through time, and we'll start with Jesus to just get him out of the way, because we're going to go back before that too. I'm going to take you back as far as I can. Some memories and some from the ancient texts that I will pull apart so you can hear them. A lot of you will hear them for the first time because they don't want you to hear this. They want you to sleep. They want you to hate. They want you to forget that we are all brothers and sisters, and yes, we have different shades of skin, but we are related to everything from the smallest to the largest on this planet. Especially the humans. My God, what do you think? I go to Pope Leo X, with an X, by the way. He said it has served us well, this myth of Christ. And religion has been the most successful, the greatest form of mass mind control yet invented. When you can get Muslims who hate their brothers, Hindus, so badly, they don't just kill them, they rape them. They rip babies from their stomachs. They brutalize them. When you get Buddhists who do the exact same to Muslims, when you get Christians who do it to just about anyone they can get their hands on, when you can get Jews who aren't even freaking Jews, by the way, from Europe to come and take over Palestine, and it's not, they've never been from there. Never. Who are, of course, mutilating, slaughtering, testing, emasculating the actual people who may have been the Hittites from Ethiopia and all across Africa. But those guys are European. No, the Jews that's a religion. It has nothing to do with being a people. Christians are from all over. Muslims are from all over. Buddhists are from all over. It is not a people. It is a belief. And it's worked so well. And it's one of the things that got us to forget our mother. And it has been the most important weapon in the truly reptilian agenda for thousands of years. Reptilian mind just works on survival and fear and lack. It is not abundant. Thinks differently. And it has imprisoned the minds of the masses and kept them in perpetual fear and servitude. This is our fight or flight mechanism. And when that's working, nothing else can work. You even lose feeling in your hands and feet because they're not necessary. You just need enough adrenaline to pump and run and fight because there's a lack and you aren't going ever to get enough, so you're in that mindset. And they accept their often grotesque plight on the word of men in long frocks who tell them it is God's plan. But why is it when a man reaches his highest authority, he must dress like a woman? Cap and gown, long flowing locks. So, Babylon to Rome. And the blueprint for control by religion was honed and polished in Babylon, in the lands of Sumer, Mesopotamia, Chaldea. Babylon is the location from where the global financial scam was foisted on the world. This scam involves lending people money that doesn't exist and charging interest on said invisible, magical, conjured money. So it's a spell. It was something thought of because only diabolical friggin' priests, or magicians, if you will, magicians, could think of something so insidious. And it just so happens that Babylon became the new headquarters of the Annunaki bloodlines after Sumer Empire collapsed. Sumer versus Kemet. Kemet that became Egypt, then had pharaohs. But know that this takeover, this strangeness, this hierarchical system happened everywhere because there was wars all over Africa that seemed to happen suddenly. There were horrific Indian wars, North America, Blackfoot against the Sullivan, many other tribes fighting. South America, same thing. Europe, our brothers and sisters there have been, horrifically treated. Maybe they felt this way first, I don't know. It would be funny if everything that we've heard of, that they didn't even land there. These ideas, this Annunaki, this force. Now, I'm not saying they're all bad. You're never going to get everyone bad. But there was obviously a war between Sumer and Kemet. And the ending of this war changed everything on planet Earth, because suddenly we stopped seeing so many of the little booby dolls, the curvy women, the mother, the little spirals in the ground, the beautiful gardens, the happiness. We saw change. There was difference. All of a sudden there were horns everywhere. There was phallic symbols everywhere. There was a change. So, their operational center later moved to Rome, and it was then that we had the Roman Empire, the founding of the Roman Church, which, understandably, was a copy of the religion of Babylon. Word for word, apparently that side won. It uses the same methods, the same symbols, the same stories. And it's interesting to note that the word basilica, as in St. Peter's Basilica in Rome, would appear to have, well, at least to originate from a term relating to both a deadly serpent and royalty. Basilisk. This is a mythical serpent, a lizard, a dragon, the king of serpents, whose hissing drove away all other reptiles, and whose glance and breath were fatal. According to Norman Lewis, the Comprehensive Word Guide. It was awesome, by the way, if you'd like to look that up. Doubleday, New York, 1958. It was the king snake that all other reptiles feared. The American Heritage Dictionary of the English Language, 4th edition, 2000, reveals that the name basilisk comes from Latin Greek terms basiliscus, basiliskos, basilios, meaning king or little king. This evolved from the Old French word basilisk. Here we have the connection, royalty, serpent yet again. Same words being used, where they went, how they changed, who used them, why. This is voodoo. So the basilisk is mentioned, actually, Psalms 91. 91, so 9 plus 1 is 10. It is a 10. She says to herself. Anyway, by the time of King James' manifestation, the reference had been changed to adder. Later, the basilisk became associated with the cock. Sorry, I have to use the word. And became interchangeable with the term cockatrice. It's a thing. I'm not just cussing here. St. Peter of Basilica fame, connected to, well, it's a great big, you know what it is. And we shall see more of this. Now, how appropriate that the centerpiece of the headquarters of the Babylonian Church in Rome be named after a royal serpent. Rome to London. When the Annunaki bloodlines moved their operational center to London after William of Orange arrived 1688-ish, we had the emergence of the British Empire. Now, remember, I'm giving you a down and dirty history here. In fact, though, the empires of Sumer, Babylon, Rome, Britain were all created and controlled by one force. In Babylon, they used the same structure that they had in Sumer, with the priesthood acting as go-between or middlemen for the gods. This gave them enormous power and control over people. Now, during the Babylon period, the Annunaki were seeking to rise from the ashes of Sumer, which was destroyed, and develop their strategy for taking over the world covertly through their bloodlines, front organizations. To do this, they needed to take out of circulation any true accounts of history, especially their own role in humanity's suppression, and the esoteric knowledge that would allow people to understand the magnitude of what was here, what is here. They don't want you to know about your power, your potential, and they've done everything so that it's almost impossible to obtain. Let's be honest, there are buildings on our ley lines. There are buildings on the crossings of our ley lines, so we can't even walk to them without going into a building who is siphoning our power. It doesn't matter to me if it's a mosque or a church or a Scientology lab. You walk into them, your soul, your energy, your true vital force is being sucked. Now, John A. Keel, K-E-E-L, in his book Our Haunted Planet, says that they chose religion as the battleground on which to conquer the mind. The parahuman serpent people of the past, still amongst us, and again, not all bad, because there are stories of marriages, there are stories of love, there are stories of defectors on all sides. But we're talking about the ones in control, like the ones in control now. Canadians are going to be blamed for their horrific mining practices that we're allowing to happen all over the world in our name. Hopefully someone looking back would know it was not all of us. But you can see, it's the rulers, it's a few families that get blamed for everything. And we always know that there's not always, there's not every, there's not all. So anyway, they were probably worshipped by the builders of Stonehenge. Take a good look at that again. And the forgotten ridge-making cultures of South America. In some parts of the world, the serpent people successfully posed as gods, initiated the techniques of superintelligence, or of the superintelligence, so God. This led to the formation of pagan religions, centering on human sacrifices, because one way or another, and they still do, they want blood. And the conflict, so far as man himself is concerned, became the religions and races. Whole civilizations based upon worship of these false gods rose and fell in Asia and Africa and South America, worldwide. And once an individual had committed himself, he opened a door so that an undefinable something, probably an undetectable mass of intelligent energy, for lack of a better term, could actually enter his body, exercise some control over his subconscious mind. And let's look at these religions. The male figure, usually called the sun or something like that, had to rise from the dead. This, again, is very dark magic. This is necromancy, kids. Because he couldn't become, they don't become exalted until they die and come back. This is dark magic. We must look at this and face these things. And the human race can always supply pawns. Each individual had to consciously commit himself to one of the opposing forces. So, Sumer versus the New Egypt, when there are pharaohs, that's when the change is. And you can tell in every single society on the planet when the change came. Exactly. Then you start getting names like chief. You start getting names like those kind of things. And then there's priests. And then, women are usually beaten. Kids are usually beaten. The first son is usually killed. The slaughter begins. Over what? Not to say that we didn't have some sort of belief system. But all over the world, our belief system looked like, first it was the netters. So we worshiped nature. We rose for the sun. And we all had this ritual every single where we look. We got up with the sun so we could wait with everything else on this planet and still hear that silence, just before. And the birds, actually, it's cute if you get up early enough, because you can always tell the young birds, because they get excited and they start chirping first before the sun comes up. It's like, the little kids when excited it's going to be Christmas. The animals on the planet, it's like everything holds its breath. Holds it, which is really good, actually. You hold your breath. Take a deep breath in and hold it. You actually will live longer. True story. We all had this. You could not hurt the planet if you remembered this. We would not allow the planet to be hurt. We would not allow our brothers and sisters be hurt if we did this. We couldn't. It would not be possible. So we changed. We supplied them pawns. And each individual had to consciously commit himself to a force. And the main battle was for what was to become known as the soul. Your ka, if you will. By choosing to give yourself to a deity or God, you open your psyche to possession by a force that deity or God, dog, Anu, hence the reptilian idea, but whatever it represents. And deities like Mary and Jesus represent very different forces to those perceived by their believers. And it's important for people to get out of religion and start recovering control of their minds. There is an important point to make here before I go on, because the symbolism of the sun is about to become very important, especially in this time, especially within the next couple months. Although it's been a very important time these last couple months. It's been traumatic. There's been upheaval. Mars and Venus dancing in the sky. This should be love. This should be lovemaking with the moon involved, with the sun alignments, these things, with Mercury too, close to the sun, most beloved. This should be a happy time, but we are seeing something completely different. And there is a general belief that the sun represents the male and the moon is female. It's understandable because of the way it looks. On one level, yeah, it's true, but there's always a twist. There came a time when the global religion of worshiping the goddess was replaced by the male god. However, that was only on the surface for public consumption, control, your general ignorance, of course, to suppress the ancient knowledge, not least of true history. It's necessary to destroy any outward expression of the goddess, of the worship of her, while it initiates continued with business as usual. Initiate. So, religions, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Buddhism too, were created to give the appearance of being dominated by a male, while in truth, the secret vehicles for the worship was still the goddess. Now this involved taking female deities like El and depicting them as male, the sun goddess. So, way back in history, the sun was female. In Japan, country with a long-standing history of serpent worship. Even though I understand in Japan there have been many peoples there. But like most places, when somebody comes in, they want to be the ones who are from there. It's like Americans fighting because they're Americans and want no immigrants. This is a story because, the immigration had already happened or your butt would still be in Europe. When everything was cool, that was fine. But unfortunately, the horrific things that were harming your ancestors followed you. So, the ruling clans always claimed descent from a sun goddess. Japanese tribes, actually, in AD 238, were ruled by Queen Himiko, who was called the daughter of the sun. The goddess Aditi, the Hindu Great Mother, depicted as the sun. She was said to be the mother of Aditya, who is the 12th, symbolic of the 12 signs of the zodiac. So she is the sun and she's a wheel. So the sun was the garment of the goddess who clothed with the sun. And that's why we get face like the sun, Jesus. Later, when Christians made their Mother Mary their version of the goddess, they said Mary was clothed in the sun. Tantric Buddhism had as the goddess, the sun. Ancient Arabs worshipped the sun as the goddess Atar or At-Thar, referred to her as the torch of the gods. Celts had the sun goddess Sulis, a name derives from Sul, S-U-I-L. It means eye and sun, both of which appear on the dollar bill, by the way, and the reverse of the Great Seal of the United States. She is known as Sul, Sol, and Suna. It's where we get sauna from. So, yeah, it's the mother, because, the steam, and the sun. It's hot. So, one of her shrines in Britain is the biggest human-made mound in Europe, called Silbury Hill, which is part of a complex of standing stones and earthworks at Avebury in Wiltshire, England. Sul was worshipped from the high places, and just as El and her derivatives were associated with mountains. Mountains are important. They are usually called mothers. Hills overlooking springs, which were most sacred. And places in Britain for the goddess Sul, like Glastonbury Tor and Bath. And overlooking Bath, for example, Salisbury Hill, Salisbury in Wiltshire, another important sun goddess site. The location of a famous cathedral, much beloved of Prince Charles too. When the Romans came to Britain, they worshipped this goddess as Sol Minerva. Her symbol was an owl, the symbol of the rituals at Bohemian Grove in the modern California. The road, secret, around the Congress building. Well, the whole system around the Congress building in Washington, D.C. is shaped unmistakably as an owl. And you can look that up in The Biggest Secret. So the lion became the symbol of the male sun, when the open became the hidden. Once again, the lion had more commonly symbolized the goddess. The mother goddess, Hathor, depicted as a lion-headed sphinx. Mystery Babylon. So the mystery schools, the secret societies, these networks designed to advance reptilian agenda, expanded rapidly from time Babylon after 2000 BC. In or abouts. I don't think it was that long ago, but others do. And again, we're dealing with different timelines here. We don't know how many times that's changed. So in this same period, the royal court of the dragon was infiltrating the Egyptian mystery schools and other structures of power. The Jewish historian Hippolymus, he said that giants built Babylon after the deluge. Unusual story. Now, according to a Babylonian text, these giants were the Annunaki. The Annunaki priesthood in Babylon began to invent a whole new history, religious truth, through which they can control the people mentally, emotionally, and, as a consequence, physically. In doing so, they replaced spiritual truths with fairy tales about mythical people, which the masses were told to take quite literally. And at this point, they were still referring to the gods, plural, because the Illuminati's manipulation had not yet reached the stage where the Anunnaki, the other gods, could be transformed, transmuted into one god. When the change came, it would eliminate the more obvious records of their existence and names started to change. The kings were followed by the Great, Alexander the Great. The thing about these people that made them different, kings like that, warriors like that, sorcerers like that, they want to be served. They're not the healers that we've had all over the world who cared for the people. They didn't want to be served. They wanted to serve. Notice the difference. Now, the priesthood, Hebrew, would achieve this. They did a great job. Together with the English translators of the Bible, the religion of Babylon created the mold. Even detailed stories for those that followed. For example, where have you heard this before? In Babylon, they worshipped the Trinity. Nimrod, the father, symbolized as a fish. Tammuz, or Ninus, the son, who was said to have died to save humanity, December 25th, and Queen Semiramis, the Babylonian Isis, who was symbolized as the dove. They said that Nimrod and Tammuz, father and son, were one. Tammuz died for the sins of humanity. The priesthood said he was put in a tomb, and 3 days later, when it rolled back, he was gone. All this was thousands of years before Christianity. It's just one of many that I've told you about. Versions of the J story. Julius Caesar. John Carter. If you like the Princess of Mars. It's a story that they were told long before Jesus was supposed to have lived. Yes, in the spring, rituals mark death, resurrection, Tammuz, Ninus. They offered buns inscribed with a solar cross, hot cross buns. And we will be right back. Welcome back, everyone. You're listening to Trace Elements Radio, live today. Oh, and before we go on, I have to say happy birthday to Chief Charles Tudog. I wanted to wait till he got in, but I hope he's out having fun. He will be doing a show later today, and I'm going to simulcast it. Hopefully. Depends on how I feel, you guys, so don't get mad at me if I don't. I'm going to try really hard. So it'll be at 6 Eastern Standard Time. Please join us if you get a chance. And that'll be on Trace Elements Radio. So, where are we? Anyway, hot cross buns of the much later Christian festival called Easter. Christianity is just recycled. And that condemns pagans as evil. What is paganism? All forms of Christianity stem from the same thing. Even the term testament is a confirmation. It's confirmed that it literally means a load of balls. It does. Testament. Lauren Savage, webmaster at davidike.com, longtime researcher of languages history, tells me that the root of testament is testes. After a long conversation, and apparently tradition says that the ancient, we'll say Hebrews for lack of a better term, used to hold the other guy's balls, testes, when hearing an oath, which explains a lot about a lot of religions. Now, funny enough, they do the same in some sort of Illuminati rituals today, I am told. Lawrence says that in the King James Version of the Bible, Abraham has a servant swear on his thigh. According to the translation, when in Hebrew tradition, it would have been by his dangly bits. It certainly gives a whole new meaning to the term got you by the balls. Staring at the phallus was another way to God in those times. In some way, this is related to remembering the covenant. All this does is make me remember that I am not as young as I used to be. So Old Testament just means old balls, and New Testament means new balls, young and old. So when we testify in court, is the judge symbolically holding our testicles? You're right, let's not go there. I will try to get my mind out of the gutter. I will. But, I would keep it out of the gutter if I was allowed to do so. And it explains a lot of the rituals that we've seen in church, a lot of the buildings that they made with little boys, a lot of the rituals of the Templars. And you will find all over the world now, all over the world, when you have a monk or a hermit, which I would have looked at before as Hermes, as something higher. But no, these men are almost always, all over the world, told to abstain from having sex. But it's specific with women. So there's a lot of ball hugging going on. Which, I'm sure is pleasurable if you're packing. Okay, moving on. Sons of God. Tammuz. It's the name for Sumerian god Damuzi, or Damu, the only begotten son, or son of the blood, who provided a blueprint for all later sons of God, including Jesus. Hebrews inherited Tammuz, also known as Adonis, from the Babylonians, and the Roman records refer to Tammuz as the chief god of the Jews. The Jewish calendar still has a month named after Tammuz, who was known as the serpent who emanated from the heaven god, Anu. And I realize the combinations of words here, and it's unfortunate, but also explains a lot of the guy on guy thing. Okay, Anu was the head of the Annunaki. So the Sumerian tablets say. Mesopotamian kings were said to be of the bloodline of Tammuz, just as Sir Lawrence Gardner claims that the Merovingian true bloodline is the bloodline of Jesus. It is said that the land was given life by the blood of Tammuz. He was a healer, he was a savior, he was a serpent, he was a shepherd who looked after his flock of stars. He died wearing a crown of thorns made from myrrh. Tammuz symbolically sacrificed on the Day of Atonement in the form of a lamb. He was worshipped in Jerusalem, where his exact story would later be retold using the name Jesus. And take a deep breath here, Vicar. The cave in Bethlehem, where Jesus is said to be born, is the same one. I mean, not kind of, I mean the exact same one, where the ancients claimed Tammuz, Adonis was born. recycled. The Bible translator, Jeremy, admitted that Bethlehem had been a sacred grove dedicated to Tammuz, the fertility god, the spirit of the corn. Bethlehem means the house of bread, or the house of corn. Horns, corn, porn. The Egyptian son of God was born in a house of bread, or a place of bread, and Jesus said that he was the bread of life. It's all pretty yeasty, anyway. So, the priesthood took the ancient Sumer sun religion, esoteric, astrological, astronomical knowledge, and the stories of their reptilian gods, and buried them in symbolic fables that spread, and we can see this spread like a contagion, like an infection all over the world. Same stories, same myths. This hid the real meaning, except to initiates, while introducing the rigid beliefs of prison religion. Every major religion, Judaism, Christianity, Hinduism, Islam, Buddhism, all have the same basic origin, the knowledge, the beliefs of Sumer, which inherited the knowledge and the beliefs and the war of Atlantis versus Lemuria. Sumer, Chaldea, versus Kemet. The major religions were all founded in the lands that were once occupied by the Sumerian Empire. They may have emphasized different elements of the Sumer belief, but that was the mold from which they all came. The priesthood. Yeah, I'll try not to think about what that means, but I think it's pretty obvious. His job, was to withdraw the true knowledge from circulation, and they twisted it, their manufactured religious text, until the knowledge that would set the people free was portrayed as evil. And they even say that their God left. He went to the land of Nod. He comes back, of course, when we call forth his name. His old names are actually too evil for me to even go into. But horrible things always happen when he is called. Look at Christianity, another goal of the priesthood, or the long frocks. Cross-dressing pedophiles, as I call them, was to develop stories and themes that made people feel powerless, insignificant, in awe of invented religious deities, and to get on your knees and worship these men in drag. Now, by being the middleman to the gods, later God, the interpreters of the law laid down by these make-believe deities, they could control the people for their masters, reptilian, and other demonic entities. There was not just one race. I'm lumping them together because we've been invaded, I think several times. Now, to stop these beings, these people rebelling against this suppression and control and poverty, the priesthood stories had to promise a paradise in the next world, not in this world. This world you have to work, but an afterlife for all who obeyed, and only those who obeyed God's law. And there is no better way to get you to hate than to say that you will not go to heaven, which will be good, if you do not obey God's law. So in other words, their law, the laws, this is how they're getting us to follow their laws now. And even though their laws are dark and they do not listen to their laws, we still follow. It's the law of the Annunaki. And for those who do not obey this law, eternal hell, damnation. Even the term sin, as I have pointed out, actually comes from the name of an Anunnaki god. So straight out of Babylon, Judaism. The texts that form the Old Testament of the Bible, foundation, Christianity, Judaism, were written after the Levite priesthood of the Hebrews were held in captivity and heavily re-educated after 586 BC. Their re-education was so deep, I'm sure they don't know what they were really doing before that, or what they believed before that. But here we go. It was Babylon. I term captivity is less appropriate. Also, the early Hebrews worshipped the serpent god of Sumer, of the Sumer Empire, and the Levites were called the sons of the great serpent, their god, of 4 letters. Was depicted as part human, part serpent, and their sacred book of esoteric, the hidden knowledge. The Kabbalah means the serpent wisdom. The Levites, or the son of the great serpent, bloodline, worshipped Yahweh as a dragon, Leviathan, hence Levite. They worshipped Cthulhu. Yahweh, serpent form, brazen serpent. Nehushtan, by the Levites. They placed golden and brass images of this deity on the altars of Hebrew temples. Excavations have discovered bronze, copper serpent symbols in former Levite temples. The mythical story of Moses and the brazen serpent set upon a cross is a symbol of this theme. Babylonians had inherited the stories and the myths of Egypt and Sumer, and now they would reappear in a twisted form in text that later became the Old Testament. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, which together make up the Jewish Torah, the Pentateuch, all written by the Levites, or under the supervision, most likely after the captivity in Babylon, where they joined forces. This is why I'm saying this captivity is a little sketchy, because very few, surprisingly enough, people who would later be called Jews actually were taken to Babylon. Most escaped. They left. So the writing on the wall, so to speak, and left. There was a specific group that was taken to Babylon. Now they joined forces with the network because it must have felt old hat to them, and they had no books at that time. Babylonian reptilian priesthood. So you find Sumerian story of King Sargon. So remember all the Lord of the Rings stuff. Floating on a river in a basket of rushes, rehashed by the Levites later, in the account of the mythical character, the Moses, and the Sumerian Eden, the abode of the gods, became the Garden of Eden in the Levite tales. The book of Genesis is an edited version, short story version, Reader's Digest version almost, of the Sumerian accounts. And it is a mass of goddess symbolism, manna from heaven, which Moses-led Israelites were supposed to have received from God or Yahweh or Jehovah, is actually the name for the goddess, Manna, who, like El, ruled the underworld, ruled the abyss. So still worshipping Cthulhu, but a female version of, or it could just be the waters and the darkness. So no, when I say the darkness, I don't mean evil. There's a darkness you feel. Have you ever been in a cave? If you've ever been in a cave with the lights out, that darkness is almost palatable. It's not evil, but it has a force. It's the deep purple black. It's the deep purple. But evil is not that darkness, although may it become that name. Anyway, Romans knew her as Manna or Mania because it was big into the undivine masculine at the time, so they named even diseases after women, horrible things. We were just breeders to them. We were a life support system for the vagina by that point. So her ancestral period, spirits were called the manes, as in the mane of a lion, so associated with the serpent cult that I've told you of before, and that of the horse, but it may have been the seahorse, so later connected with the Amazons and the Valkyries, further north. So the names Manna and Mania, we get the word to describe as crazed behavior. And you can see how things change when we have shaman, shadow. It was shady. It frightened them. So anyway, this is derived from the worship of the moon goddess, as in moon madness, lunacy, mantra, Sanskrit term for projecting vibrations by chanting words, sounds, same root. Manu is the name for the Indian version of Noah. Noah is a story all over the world of the one who survived deluge. It also means captain, and with the help of a great serpent called Vasuki. There's usually a story, 8 guys in a boat. The boat is captained by Noah, or name Noah or Manu, or something close to that. Now, earlier times, Manu was the womb of the goddess. Levites, those Babylonian mystery school initiates, invented the entire history for the Hebrews to hide the real story and create a fiercely imposed structure of religious control. The rabbis continue that tradition to this day. And there is far more about this story in The Biggest Secret. I have highlighted the way the texts are coded with this esoteric knowledge and why the vast majority of people who we call Jewish today have zero genetic connection to Palestine or Israel or any part of Africa. As a matter of fact, most are Polish. But we've talked about that. So, Many originate, as the Jewish sources have confirmed, from the Khazars, a people of southern Russia and the Caucasus Mountains. So they're mostly Turkish, at least far back. They had a mass conversion to Judaism in the 8th century. They were taught by the Levite priests, so the term Jewish and Hebrew have become mixed up. Some call people Jewish, go back to Hebrews, the Middle East. Most, though, don't. Most come from the Caucasus. They were trained by the people who were trained for a new religion that was made up in Babylon. And it doesn't matter where they came from, I guess. It's just a body. If people are being told a fib, they have the right to know. So much of Hebrew knowledge came from Egyptian mystery schools, and this is where the Hebrew language started. Classic Hebrew or Jewish name, Kohen, comes from Kohen, the Egyptian name for priest and prince. And there are fundamental connections between Hebrews and both Egypt and Babylon, the later, of course. After all, people who become known as Hebrews came from within the same Sumer Chaldean Empire that included the lands we call Israel or Palestine. They were just an expression of the same empire, and doubtless the priesthood of the Sumerians and Egyptians and Hebrews and Babylonians. They were connected to the same Brotherhood network that go back to Atlantis versus Lemuria. The Sumerian priesthood were the middlemen between the people and the reptilian gods, and so in the end were the others. The invented story of the Exodus was written to obscure the truth of what really happened in Egypt. And there is no historical record outside the Levite text, nor any archaeological evidence that any such exodus actually took place. Now, between 1967 and 1982, the Israelis occupied the Sinai Desert. They investigate a massive search for evidence of the 40 years the Israelis were supposed to have lived there. Guess what they found? A great big fat zero. And the loss of the Egyptian army in the Red Sea, not recorded in any historical document. This is utterly ludicrous if it had actually happened. Greek historian Herodotus traveled, researched the lands and the history of Egypt and Near East, and yet he heard nothing of King Solomon, nothing of the mass exodus of the Israelis from Egypt, because they weren't there. They weren't. Okay, the Egyptian army drowned in the Red Sea. Nothing. Neither did the Greek philosopher Plato. L.A. Waddell, fluent reader of Sanskrit, fluent reader of Sumerian, Chaldean, Egyptian, searched that whole region. Great detail, had money. His conclusion, there's absolutely no inscriptural evidence whatsoever, nor any great ancient Greek or any great ancient Roman reference for the evidence of Abraham or the Jewish patriarchs or the prophets of the Old Testament, nor for Moses, Saul, David, Solomon, nor any of the Jewish kings, with the mere exception of 2, or at most 3, of the later kings. Nor was there any claim for evidence of any of these people until the Levites were taken to Babylon, where the plot was hatched. The same stories that were told about Abraham, like the near sacrifice of his son, can be found, though, in India. Earlier versions of Moses appear all over the Near and Middle East and Mediterranean region under different names. In Babylon, they said that God gave Namu, the lawgiver, the tablets of law on a mountaintop. After the Levites left Babylon, they turned Namu into Moses. In Syria, they had a guy called Moses, who did all the things that the Levites attributed to Moses. Like Sumerian king Sargon, Moses was found as a baby floating in a basket of reeds or rushes. Moses went on to part the waters with his magical rod, which is rude. Never mind. And he was the guardian of law, written in stone. Another, Moses, was an Egyptian hero, Ra Hadral Hati, whose alleged life was also copied from forgers of history. 10 Commandments, so associated with Moses, copy of the laws known as the Code of the Hammurabi. These were written at least 1,000 years earlier, and of course, where the Code of the Hammurabi came from, Babylon. But this Code of the Hammurabi goes back even further to our old friend Indra, Thor, St. George, the first king of Sumer, and his 10 Commandments of some 5,000 years ago. They were called in the Edda the Hug runes. The word hug, meaning affection, love, good heart, hence hugging. Hugging comes from that word. So you find the completion of this document regurgitated in many different places. So, if Jesus was the only begotten Son of God, why does the Bible reference in Genesis that there's more than one Son? And then the sons of God saw the daughters of men were exceedingly beautiful. Why does Buddha, Krishna, and Jesus all have Mary as mothers? Why are there so many Marys in the Bible? What if they are all aspects that the male-dominated religion decided women were? Why does Jesus refer to another son in a parable of 2 sons? One of the sons mentioned, they make a point to capitalize the S. Why? Serpent. When Jesus is referred to in the New Testament, they capitalize the S, indicating that there is at least 2 sons. The Bible's constantly being printed, and they keep updating and changing what was said. Does not the end of Revelations warn of this? Who is Emmanuel? Was that not supposed to be Jesus' name? If so, why is he called Jesus? Since it mentions in the Old and New Testament that he is to be called Emmanuel. And don't let me even start on letter J. Now, chronologically, it shows that the time that Jesus was supposed to be in existence, Herod was not even the official of that area. He was not even born yet. So he did not chase Jesus. If the God of the Bible says he hates evil, but then turns around and says he does both good and evil, what does this really imply? Believers are encouraged to be like Christ. and God. Lest ye be perfect, because you, Father in heaven, is perfect. Perfectly jealous? The beginning of all abuse tales? And this thing can go on all night, because the trick of the Bible is filled with contradictions, thus giving the person reading it a bad case of blind faith. And as I've said before, to have an antichrist, you must first have a Christ. One cannot come before the other, but they are in fact about the same thing, a part of the same agenda, separate from the Most High, by saying one must go through man, and that was once a God. Lastly, I can say this. What tends to happen to the bound is no matter how much information you give them, they will only, in the end, think you're the devil, especially if you know more about the Bible than they do. After all, Christians were told the devil knows the Bible better than they do, and thus one should not listen to those who say that the book is Zionist propaganda at its finest. They have thought everything, have trapped people as such. It's all plays on words. It's all meant to enslave you, and it's done a great job. So the age of the world, and the floods, and the planets, and the days of the weeks, and the moon. In the most early history of mankind, I find all nations endeavoring to indulge a vanity by tracing their particular origin to the most remote periods. And they will fight in words and deeds because, of course, their God is the greatest. Their daddy is better than your daddy. And for the gratification of this vanity, inventing fables of every description of this weakness, they have all, in reality, been guilty. But the inhabitants of the Oriental countries occupy a rather more prominent place than those of the Western world, and I believe it will not be denied that the investigation of subjects connected to the first race of men, that they are entitled on every account to claim precedence. All nations have a tradition of the destruction of the world by flood, and of the preservation of man from its effects. It appears to me that the question of the existence of the human race previous to the flood will not much interfere with my inquiries, but will, if it be admitted, only oblige me to the reason and the idea that certain facts took place before it, and the effects arising from them were not affected by it. So the sayings of wise men, there were not one, probably, more wise than that of the celebrated Know Thyself. And probably there is not one to which so little regard has been paid. It is to the want of attention that this particular and this principle that I attribute most of the absurdities from which vice and wise and learned and perhaps all ages should be reproached. Man has forgotten or been ignorant that his faculties are limited now. He has failed to mark the line of demarcation beyond which his knowledge could not extend. Instead of applying his mind to objects recognizable by your senses, he has attempted subjects above the reach of the human mind, has become lost and bewildered in the mazes of metaphysics. He has not known, nor has, and has not attended to what is so clearly proved by many, that no idea can be received except through the medium of common sense. We have endeavored to form ideas without attending to that principle. And, as might be expected, we have run into the greatest absurdities, which is the only consequence of such things, and anger, and trauma, and ridiculousness. We should be getting ourselves together, fighting for each other. The information of historical transitions supposed to have taken place in a previous catastrophe and its attendant flood, which destroyed an ancient world and is very small. It's been observed by many that the famous cycle of the Neros, the cycle of the 7 days, or the week, from their particular circumstances, must have probably been an antediluvian invention. No persons could have invented the Neros who had not arrived at a much greater perfection in astronomy than we know was the state of the most ancient Assyrians, Egyptians, Kemetans, Greeks, Chaldeans. The greatest of these nations supposed that the year consisted of 360 days only, when the inventor of the Neros must have known its length within a few seconds of time, a fact that was observed by Mons Bailey to be decisive proof that science was formally brought to perfection, and therefore consequently must be or must have been lost later. There are indeed many among the Hindus that had very profound knowledge of science, and that was brought by their ancestors, especially the upper countries of India, Himalayan mountains, Tibet, Kashmir. These were, as I understand, the first descendants of the people who lived after the deluge. It looked like it was there. But this science has been forgotten by the degeneration. And I'm not blaming them. Maybe we had to live in caves. If we're just trying to keep our kids, basically not eaten by lions if we're scared, if we're hungry, it's pretty easy to lose a whole generation of elders. So the present race of the Brahmins, but the ancient Hindus might be acquainted with the Neros. But I think it is probable that Josephus was correct in saying it is of an antediluvian discovery. That is, it was discovered previous to the time allotted for the deluge. And it is curious that we receive this tradition from people amongst who we find apparently antediluvian part of the book, the first track of the book, the thing called Genesis, which can be argued whether or not Genesis was supposed to be in the first of the book or the middle of the book. I've seen actually both references. Now, throughout all the ancients, all the nations of the ancient world, the planets are to be found appropriated to the days of the week. 7-day cycle. Each day named after a planet. Universally the same day allotted to the same planet in all nations of the world, which is suspicious, or constitutes a first proof, and leaves no room for doubt that we had one system, that there must have prevailed over the whole, that we had communication, that we knew we were one people, that apparently at one point on this planet Earth, we were not all a-holes to each other. We were family. Here are the origin. Here are the reason for all the astrology, as well as the foundation upon which many of the mythologies was built later. That the two are closely and intimately connected. What we will do, probably for the next couple weeks, is trace steps by which, from the earliest time in the small beginnings, that the system grew to a vast and towering height, covering the world with gigantic monuments, beautiful temples, enabling one part of mankind by means of fear and ignorance of the other part to trample most of the oldest people into dust. Uncivilized man, by nature, is the most timid of animals. In this state, we are defenseless. We are defenseless against the monsters with guns, or whatever those weapons be. We came defenseless. The storm, the thunder, the lightning, the eclipse, we were filled with terror. We were alarmed, trembled at everything. Everything that we didn't understand. The different histories of creation. Collections of books. The one called Genesis has been in the western part of the world at least the most celebrated, and the nonsense which has been written respecting it vies with the nonsense a little time alluded to in ancient learned men of Greece and Rome, who probably wrote the book to begin with. But this book professes to commence with a history of creation. And in our vulgar translation it says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. But the word heavens, the word planets, ought to be substituted. The original for the word heavens is of great consequence. It's been admitted that it has the meaning of placers or disposers. In fact, it means that the planets, as distinguished from fixed stars, and is a foundation. And as I've said, and as we will find upon astrology, perhaps that the mythology was built on these things. So, the names of the gods alluded to each day: Sunday to the sun, Monday to the moon, Tuesday to Mars, Wednesday to Mercury, Thursday to Jupiter, Friday to Venus, Saturday to Saturn. It's worth watching, looking at. Neither Bacchus nor Hercules is amongst these names. I shall have an observation to make as we go on too. But we will have references to astrology took rise from these planetary bodies. So this doctrine respecting the moon will be odd, paradoxical, absurd maybe, and I'll be asked what I make of the goddess Isis. Inconsistencies is what I make, contradictions, and manifest ignorance of the ancients respecting this goddess, which induced me to think that the moon was never an object of worship, not in the first times, and that it was never made an object of adoration until relatively new times, when the knowledge of all of the ancient mysteries was gone, and perhaps the loss of common sense in general. Not only the knowledge of the mysteries, but the knowledge of religion itself. Or maybe we've just had it beaten out of us, or beaten into us, or at least of its origin, of its meaning. Those are God. The least attention to the treaties of Pluto and Cicero and Polyphore and Phornudus, and in short, every single one of at least the ancient writers that we know of on the subject of religion, can convince any unprejudiced person that they were either all completely in the dark or pretended to be. And after some got to worship onions and crocodiles, etc., etc., there's no doubt that the moon came in for a share of some sort of adoration. But all the accounts of it are full of inconsistencies, full of contradictions. For this reason, I think it was a late invention, and that Isis was not originally the moon, but the mother of the gods. Many other reasons for this opinion, but I'll talk about that later, when I come to the treaty of Isis and the moon. But the first god of the ancients, the sun, the double nature of the deity, the psychosis, the renewal of worlds, moral and evil, eternal and eternity of matter, and Buddha in Genesis. So I'll try to piece them together in a way that makes a little bit more sense, that all the gods of antiquity resolved themselves into the solar fire, sometimes itself as a god, sometimes as an emblem or a Shekinah of a higher principle, known by a name of a creative being or the creative being. It's profound in nature. It talks about a state of the human mind superior to anything to be met with, what we have been accustomed to hear or even consider, call ancient times. I am strongly, at least inclined to refer to the authors of the Neros, or to an enlightened race, supported by Mons and Bailey, to have formerly existed. And we'll continue with that for the next little while. Thanks for listening all, and Two Dog did drop by. I just wanted to say happy birthday, and join us again at 6 if you get a chance, and He's going to be interviewed by someone other than me. So if you're sick of hearing my voice, you hear someone else. Okay, guys, thank you so much. I love you and have a great day.